There's fever in the funkhouse now.
Lost your audio.
Uh, can't hear me?
I can now.
Okay, there we go.
I don't know
I,
what happened.
I said there's fever in the funkhouse now. That I wanted to make a sort of final addition point about sports because we touched on that last time we talked, and about why do we care? Why are they important? Why does it matter so much to some people and matter way, too much just to certain people? And I realized there are a couple different reasons for me. And one of them is my dad and I had a very bumpy relationship, but sports was like the one area where we bonded. As a matter of fact, like at the breakfast table, I would have to wait for him to finish the sports page so I could read the sports page. And if I was reading it when he came down to breakfast, I'd immediately give it up and then wait for him to give it back. And even at 11 years old, I was like, why don't they have a newspaper with two sports sections in it? And so and so we were sitting next to each other in 1975. Game six, World Series. Carlton Fisk hits a famous home run against your Cincinnati Reds. We were there in the right field grandstands. We had season tickets to Boston University's hockey team, which was a top elite team in the country, college team in the country, and so we'd go to all those games. And we watch games on TV. I remember us watching the time Michael Jordan first came into the league, and we didn't know who he was. There was no internet then. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know really who he was. And he torched the Celtics for 63 points, and after which Larry Bird said that was God disguised as Michael Jordan.
That
But I
was a
remember my
playoff game too,
yeah,
right?
yep.
I remember that.
And my dad and I were just every move Jordan made, we're like, oh my God. And so those are memories that, important memories that if without sports I wouldn't have. The other thing is, and this is, I think, the difference between our upbringings and why again sports is so much more important to me. And even though I know you're a sports fan, is you correct me if I'm wrong, you're a Miami Dolphins fan, you were a Cincinnati Reds fan. Those are all teams from other cities. When you grow up
Right.
in Boston, Boston is a very provincial city. Your teams mean something to you. The fact that the Red Sox went 86 years without winning the World Championship, that meant a lot. There's a very a well-traveled highway called Storrow Drive in Boston, and with a sign that says reverse curve. And someone at one point spray painted it, changed it to reverse the curse, and that was just well known for that. And so it was a huge thing, with the Red Sox, and the other and then in the Celtics and all in the Bruins, every year, even if the Bruins are doing poorly as they are now, like that place is packed. People really care. And then when there are championships, the parades are insane. I mean, just millions of people, packing the streets. And it really brings the city together. And you invest in that, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. I think certain people get carried away way too much with sports? Yes, absolutely. But I also see, like, much like for some people it's the church or the synagogue or the mosque. For in Boston it was Boston Garden.
Just
It's
takes your money
Fenway
in a different
Park.
way.
Yes. And money's made it bad. Money's corrupted a lot of it. I mean, the other thing is free agency. And free agency is important because the players, need to have their freedom as well. But growing up, not just being a Red Sox fan, but the same players year after year. Yaz was there for forever. Dwight Evans was there. Jim Rice was there. Yeah, Fred Lynn and Carlton Fisk did leave, but we had so many players who were there forever. Same with the Celtics with Larry Bird, McHale, and Parrish. Same with the Bruins. Ray Bork was with the Bruins for 19 years. And nowadays it's just very different. Players come and go like that. And as Seinfeld once said, we're rooting for laundry, because you're just rooting for like whatever is the name on the back,
That's a
that
good
at that
point.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that changes it. And that's definitely affected me.
So
Um,
let me ask you this.
yeah.
So there's such a rich history for professional sports and I guess college sports too in Boston. Do you think if you had grown up in, say, Columbus, Ohio, do you think, excuse me, that bond between you and your dad would have been solidified so much around sports or in a place that doesn't have, the same cachet as a Boston or a New York City or even an LA for that matter with the Lakers? Do you think that still would have been there as much with you and your dad?
I think it would have been more centralized. So, for example, if we'd grown up in like if we lived in like Ann Arbor, Michigan, like then we would have been like the University of Michigan fans, but we wouldn't have been. There are no pro teams there, or I guess there are in Detroit, but it wouldn't have been the same. And also because not all cities are like Boston in that regard. Because even in LA, it's different. I mean, and I'm not knocking them. Like they do care about their teams and all, but not the way Boston does, not the way Philly does. Like, it's
It's a
just
religion in
different.
those East Coast cities,
Yeah,
like Philly or Boston. So to your point about the teams that I was a big fan of as a kid, and to a degree, still as an adult, that was simply because where I grew up, there was no professional sports team.
sure.
So how it worked for me,
Yeah.
and I think this is pretty typical of a little kid. If you look at my favorite teams from back then, the Miami Dolphins, the Cincinnati Reds, the Montreal Canadiens, what did they all have in
Yeah,
common
they were
back then?
winners.
Exactly. So that's, as a third grader, you gravitate towards whoever's winning. And so that's why there was no teams in Seattle at that time. And my parents weren't into sports per se. It was just, I don't even know how I got into it, frankly. It just wasn't that big in my family growing up. Um, but it is interesting how you say that created more of a bond with you and your dad. And it also, I think, speaks to, because wasn't your dad was an academic, right? He was
Yep.
a professor. So it really runs the gamut as far as the type of people that it latches onto being a sports fan, from blue collar workers to academics like your dad to the woman who's manning the cashier at Walmart. It really sort of infects all of society, in a huge way, and it's kind of an interesting thing. How it works that way, and it is, I guess it is. It all just comes down to belonging to something. I mean, ultimately, we just
Yeah.
want to belong to something,
Yeah. And it's the
and
same. Oh, please go.
and belonging to a group of fans of a specific team. I guess that's at the root of it, because at the end of the day, it's really just ridiculous games. They are games, and people getting way overpaid for them, and it's the teams consist um, of these people from different parts of the country or different parts of the world. However, since they're wearing that laundry, like you said, it makes it easier to identify with them, and it's silly, but at the same time, I get it too.
And it's interesting because also not only was the bond with my dad, but also with Julie. When I met Julie and she became my first wife, I turned her on to sports, and she became a huge sports fan. And we went to Patriots games, we went to Bruins games, we'd watch the games together. I remember one time my dad and I went to the track, and Julie had to stay home because she was doing her homework, and she was studying for med school, and she was not a horse racing fan anyway. But I get home and I like, hey, did you catch up on your studying? She goes, oh, you wouldn't believe it. And she starts launching this thing about the Bruins game. She goes, Hextall went crazy. He smashed his stick, and she's just so enthusiastic as she's retelling, what had happened at the end of the Bruins game. And I love that. I love that sort of passion, and sports brings out that sort of passion. But people do want to belong. How I met Kim, actually, ironically enough, was not at all through sports. It was through music, and it was through a group called the Firewater Circus, and which was an online group of basically a fan club of Firewater, of the band that she and I were both fans of, that brought us together. And there were a bunch of us on it, and it was a Yahoo group or whatever, and people would post like messages or stories. And when Firewater played, we'd all go meet up at the shows. And so, like, I went to New York, I went to Connecticut, I went to, we did it in Boston. We'd all meet up, and there was like 20 of us, and we'd all get. And there were times, some people stayed over at my house, because they were Firewater fans and they were in town. And that's not sports, but it's pretty much the exact same thing. You know,
And they did really well in the playoffs that year too, didn't they? Firewater.
I'm just letting that one just go right by. So, I mean, if you went to a concert and you were the only person there, on the one hand, you're like, okay, well, this is enjoyable. I've got a lot of elbow room. On the other hand, it's just not the same. It's not enjoyable, you know, because it's the crowd. Now, the crowd can also get on my nerves at concerts and at sporting events. But again, it's that it's that sense of unity, and again having a rooting interest, and that's one of the things I know that you knock fantasy sports like fantasy football, but at the same time, every year you and I do a NHL playoff picking thing. Why? To make it more interesting, to make it more fun. That's the same thing as fantasy football. You know,
Keep that to ourselves.
we don't want to get audited. Um, and so, but and I think fantasy sports has been one of the reasons sports has exploded. Even like all sports, and also just like TV viewership and all. I mean, believe it or not, the NHL is bigger now than it's ever been, and it's just surprising. And that's the other thing to watch sports. When I watch Connor McDavid play, it's like watching a ballerina. I mean, it's like watching, it's just amazing to watch. It's like when I would watch Jordan. I mean, there's an athletic excellence that that you get to see that just is amazing. That you don't see every night by any means, but you certainly see in certain games. They're just mind blowing what people could do.
It is like the same way we appreciate great art. The athletes who are performing at the absolute highest level, and the ones like McDavid, like he's above everybody else, and it's very noticeable. And it really is like performing great art.
Yeah,
That's how skilled they are and how difficult it is to do something at that level. And it's so rare. And
it's amazing.
he
You know.
is just like a Jordan, or a Gretzky, or I don't know who else you'd
Yeah,
throw in there.
no, I'm watching him, and to keep stick handling and changing directions at the speed he's going at, it's just amazing. And again, watching Jordan, I remember it looked like Jordan was walking on air when he first came into the league, when he'd like go up
Hmm.
for a dunk. I was like, he's defying gravity. How is this guy doing that? You know, it was just amazing to watch. And and actually, as far as Seattle goes, Ichiro was always one of my favorite players to watch.
Hmm.
Really exciting.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
and I love seeing him smoke in the dugout.
yeah.
That's what I liked about
Yeah.
him.
Well, that was the great thing about Bobby Lane, the quarterback for the Detroit Lions in the 50s. He'd smoke in the huddle.
Different time.
Yeah.
So speaking about crowds at shows or sporting events or whatever, I can't remember if I even mentioned it, but I went and saw a show in Chicago recently, Tindersticks,
Yeah.
and they hadn't played in the States for, I think, over 15 years. So it's one of those bands that is one of my favorite bands, and I've been wanting to see them live forever. And they did a very limited little tour in the States. I think they played 5 shows in the States and maybe 3 or 4 in Canada. And they played at this place called the Athenaeum Theater in Chicago. And it's one of those stereotypical old musty smelling theaters that's been around since probably the early 1900s, if not the late 1800s. Probably seats about 1,500 people. And anyway, it was the perfect concert going experience as an old fart because I had 10th row seats right on the floor, right in the middle. The acoustics in the theater are fantastic. That band plays with such finesse and such a great feeling, and the sound was so good. Everything about it was perfect, almost everything, because you could hear really well, you could see really well. It was comfortable. Um, their music is not conducive to like dancing and
Yeah.
rah rah type of like Springsteen sort of feel. It's very much more subtle than that and sedate almost. I could see where they would be a turn off to a lot of people. It's like, God damn, I about fell asleep after 8 songs that were at the same tempo and this same sort of shifted dynamics. But for me, it was one of the best shows in recent memory for sure. They're just such such a good band and even better live, which kind of blew me away. Um, so anyway, my point being is, uh, give me a show like that anytime where it's really comfortable and there's no logistical hassle. It's really easy to just drive around Chicago and go park. I parked like a block away from the venue. And I'm not used to that sort of thing, and it's why I stay away from big shows because they're the exact opposite of all of the good stuff I just mentioned about Tinder Sticks.
Yeah, yeah, big shows can be such a pain in the ass. That was one of the things I liked so much about going to those college hockey games with my dad, because the arena only sat like 2,000 people,
Hmm.
and yeah, and parking was easy, and the fans were all students of the college. They were all Boston University students, so they were totally into it. And it was the days before cell phones, so people were not on their phones during the games, which was a wonderful thing. And the music was not pumped in DJ music; it was a band. And so it was really wonderful. It's just, the total, like, college experience when I was in high school. So I love that. And the same thing about shows. When I went to see, I never went to stadium shows. Well, once or twice. But for the most part, I really tried to go to only small places, and I haven't been to a large place in a long time because I just don't like it. I agree. I'm like
It
you.
sucks.
One of the weird things about the Tinder Sticks, though, there are 5 shows they played. One of them was in Knoxville, Tennessee. What the
That
hell?
was at a festival. I think it was at
Oh,
a
okay.
festival of
Good.
some
Okay.
sort.
Okay. Otherwise, that is the most bizarre choice in the world. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that makes
I'm
sense.
quite sure that was a festival. I don't know the name of the
Yeah,
festival, but
yeah.
that's what it was.
I was just reading about I was reading last week about Coachella this year, and how there was a huge backup, like the car, vehicle backup, and there's like no food and water for hours. I was like, why? Why do people go to Burning Man? Why do people go to Coachella? Why would anyone go to the Fry Festival? Why do people do these things?
I think it's more conducive if you're still in your 20s, maybe even early 20s, and you just want to be part of something and something that seems happening. And I don't know, maybe you're just going to, looking to get laid or whatever, as opposed to being older residents or
Yeah.
older citizens where it's like, who fucking needs
Yeah.
that hassle? It ruins the experience.
When I'd watch the movie, when I'd watch Woodstock, I'm like, oh my God, put a gun to my head to be there. Like, that's the last thing in the world I want. I would just wait till the movie comes out and just go see it in the theater.
But again,
Yeah,
there wasn't people in their late 50s, early 60s
yeah.
at Woodstock, and I doubt at Coachella either. There's old farts there for the most part,
And the
unless
tr
they're performing.
and Kim and I certainly went to our fair share of music festivals, but not ones that big.
Hmm.
Like, we'd go to Austin City Limits Fest and Jazz Fest in New Orleans and stuff like that. And they're somewhat big, but they're not nothing like Coachella, or Glastonbury, and it's stuff like that. It's like I said, I've mentioned before, I'm claustrophobic. And so as it is, going to see bands takes a summoning up of, like, okay, hold it together, Kenny. Like, and I'm either going to be right against the stage or in the far back, because if I'm in the middle of the pack, I can't take it. And whenever I go to a movie or the airplane, aisle seat. My brother and I, we won't fly. Like, middle seat, forget it. We just won't fly. And
Well, I get that. I mean, you're a big guy, as am I,
yeah,
and the middle seat is absolute torture.
yeah. And okay, my brother was once asked to switch seats with a quadriplegic, and he said no.
Or the guy's expecting,
Yeah.
anybody he could ask anybody, and of
Right.
course they're going to give up their seat for this
Yeah.
poor handicapped guy, and your
Yeah.
brother shuts him down.
And
That's
and
funny.
speaking of that, one time Kim and I were when we were living in Sarasota, we're at a Tampa Bay Rays game, and there's a guy who's a quadriplegic, and so he's sitting in the aisle, okay, in his wheelchair, and there's a foul ball hit, and it's up, and you can see it coming down, and it's coming down, and like Kim and I are like, no, 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 and like he can't do anything about it. Wham! It just nails
Hit
him.
him.
Yeah. People all raced over to help the guy out. Oh my God. But it was like one of those things I'm watching. It's like watching a car accident. Like, like you can't, like, it's just happening. And,
In
so,
slow
but,
motion.
but another memorable sports moment. Um, but, uh, but yeah, so how many shows I've been to in my life, and the fact that I don't like crowds and I'm claustrophobic, like, that's how much I love music.
Yeah, that would make it challenging for sure. So what happens if you go to a show where there's assigned seating and you're in the middle?
I'm not in the middle, because when
You
I'm
would
getting seats, like,
Okay, so that would, like, let's say it's at a theater that seats 1,500 people, and the only seat is in the middle, like 15 rows back. You wouldn't go to the show because of that?
It would depend. It would have to be. It wouldn't. I wouldn't go see Sushi Robo. It would have to be like a band I'm really dying to see.
You and everybody else on the planet.
So I would under certain circumstances, but I'd be doing my best to I'd be looking at other marketplaces to see can I get a ticket on the secondary market? I'll pay more.
Hmm.
And so when I would go to club shows, I could be in the back because I'm tall and I could see, and that's where a lot of times Kim and I would just split up at a show because she could never see in the back, so
Hmm.
she would go to the front or she'd be in the middle and I'd
She
stay in
didn't
the
hop
back.
up on your shoulders, huh?
No,
Or
first of all,
whip her top off and hop up on your shoulders.
I never offered, and second of all, that is so not Kim. She would never have done that. Uh,
So
um,
speaking of tickets,
yeah.
I was supremely bummed out by something that happened here recently. Um, there's this little comedy club here called what's it called? Jukebox Comedy Club. And it's one of those old school divey comedy clubs that's probably been around since the 80s and seats like 150, 200 people, just a total dive. Anyway, I went and saw a comedy show there a couple months ago with a friend of mine here, and it was good. And as a guy from New York, and there was like maybe 40 people there, and it was a good old school experience where you just walk up to the bar and you pay, and it's in the back room, and just not corporate at all and very old school. But anyway, um, it turns out when I'm out of town a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago in Seattle, it's announced that Louis C.K. is doing a couple shows there as a thank you to the guy who owns the place, who used to book him before Louis C.K. was a successful comedian. So we're talking about back in the early 90s. And of course, it just happened to be announced when I was out of town. So I didn't know the tickets. I didn't know about it until a few days after the fact. And of course, at that time, all the tickets are sold out. And I was trying online to score a ticket, and it was just virtually impossible. I put an ad on Craigslist, and boy, as a new this was new to me. All the scammers
I was
that
going to say
came
I would
after
never
me.
put an ad. Yeah,
Wow, I
that's
couldn't
like saying
believe it.
please scam me. Yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
yeah.
I didn't realize there was such a market for that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
And anyway, I didn't get tickets, and it was just such a bummer because uh, aside from, even though he's had his whatever personal moments over the last few years, Louis C.K. with the jerking off in front of other female comedians or whatever. None of
Yes.
that stuff I'm a big fan of course, but he's still one of my favorite comedians. I think he's brilliant. I think his show was brilliant that he did, the Louis show. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And this other thing he did, it was I guess a limited series, 10-part limited series called Horace and Pete. I don't know if you've heard about that, but anyway, one of my all-time favorite comedians, and I'm just bummed that I missed it. And it was simply, a logistical thing where I just happened to be out of the town the day it was announced, and that's all it took because it's such a small place.
Yeah, no, that's too bad because there are shows I would go to. I'm not the fan you are, but I would still go because of that's what a unique experience. Um,
Hmm.
a few months ago, Paul McCartney played three shows unannounced at the Bowery Ballroom in New York, which is
Hmm.
a small club. And
Yep.
I'm not the biggest Paul McCartney fan in the world. I would have gone, like
Sure.
if I could have gone, because how often do you get that sort of experience? When I was living in New Orleans, I was flying home to Boston, and I realized, and that's Nashville Pussy was in town, and they were doing it was their first tour. Okay, but I had read about them, and I was like dying to see them. And even though I hadn't ever seen them, and I hadn't even heard them, I only read about them, but I was like dying to see them. And unfortunately, I'm flying home, so I convinced my girlfriend Ariane at the time to go to the show, and she's like very straight, very middle of the road. She went with two of her friends. I said to her afterwards, when I got back, I said, "How was it? How was the show?" She said, "It was a sociological experience."
She was that German chick, right, who used to work at the bar around the corner from my place in San Francisco.
No, Ariane was in New Orleans. You're talking about Annika, and you mean
Oh,
Swedish.
that's right.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
that's who I was thinking of.
yeah. And Annika and I were always just good friends. We were
That's what
never.
I thought. So
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you said your
yeah,
girlfriend,
yeah.
that didn't compute, but
No.
now it makes sense because you're
Uh,
talking about someone else.
yeah, yeah. Annika and I. It's funny because we like people often thought we were going together because we were together like almost all the time. But
That's because you lived at that bar she worked
yeah,
at.
exactly. It's a Norm.
The what was the name of that place?
Pure Street Annex.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. I
Those were the
the problem
days.
was before I moved into your place, I lived right across the street. And
Yeah.
so I couldn't even, and remember the bar was sort of had an outdoor part, like, and
Uh-huh.
so I couldn't even walk by, without, hey, Ken, come on in, and so yeah, that was not and then when I was living in Boston with Kim, we were living across the street from a pizza restaurant. I was like, I don't want to live across the street from a bar. I don't want to live across the street from a pizza shop. It's like, these are bad things, you know?
Hey, so saw a couple great music documentaries recently. Curious if you've seen them or know of them. One is the Sly Stone documentary that Questlove did,
Yeah.
and it's on Hulu. Have you seen that?
No, it's in my queue. It's in my watch list.
Really, really
Yep.
good.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward
Really
to.
good.
I've seen some Sly Stone stuff. I haven't seen that one in particular, but people don't know enough about him. He is a really interesting guy, and what a instrumentalist, a multi-talented producer, singer, keyboard, guitar, everything.
Is high of regard, or he's held up there with one of the greats. He's up there, but he's still underrated.
Yeah.
And after watching this movie, it was really hammered home even more. Like I I've loved Sly and the Family Stone a lot forever, and I like them even more after watching this movie. There's all kinds of great footage of them uh, performing and recording, like their first album in the studio. So their first album was virtually unknown and
They were
did not
really
sell
young.
many copies. There was no hits on it, and uh, when you listen to it now, you realize how ahead of its time it was. I think it came out in '66. It's called A Whole New Thing. Like I said, no hits on it, and you realize like there's really hard driving funk on it that even James Brown wasn't doing in 1966. So it was really interesting to see how ahead of their time they truly were. And it was not only because they're an interracial band, which was pretty rare at that
Yeah.
time. Half the band were white folks, half of them black, and but the sound they created was so ahead of its time. And if you don't, do you know that record, A Whole New
No,
Thing?
no.
Might be worth your time checking out. But
Yeah, I will.
as good as their records after that are, this one, which was unheralded, is also really good. Um, but I got to hand it to this Questlove guy, the drummer for the Roots, who
Right.
made this movie as well as Summer of Soul,
Yep.
which
Yeah,
I
I
think
saw
you
that.
saw.
Yeah.
So, and I think we talked about that, and
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, you really like that as well. Well, this is just as good, if not better. And Sly Stone is such an interesting guy and had so many ups and downs throughout his life, and it's kind of amazing he's still alive,
Yes.
considering what he put himself through and what he went through as a successful musician. And anyway, a plus. You definitely check it out. I think you'll like it.
Okay. Okay. Like I said, it's on my list, so I'll definitely see that. Especially because that subscription ends May 8th, so I'm on the clock. So,
Another one
yep.
I wanted to mention. It's called Morricone, and coincidentally, it's about Ennio Morricone.
Now,
Uh,
is it called that or is it called Ennio?
uh,
Because I do have one bookmarked in my list as well for Prime.
It must be
Ennio.
called Ennio.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Okay. Because I
And
was like,
it's
there couldn't be two documentaries. One's called Ennio, one's called Morricone. I'm like,
yeah,
that's no.
you're right. You're right.
Okay.
And it's about 2.5 hours long, which
Yep.
seems, boy, that's a long running time for a music doc. But man, it's really, really good. Again, he's my all-time favorite
Yeah, I know
music
you've got like
artist.
50 albums of his.
Prob Try about 100. He he um he did over 500 soundtracks,
Yeah, it's incredible.
and yeah, I scoop them up whenever they're available to me for, a reasonable price. But anyway, I'm
Side
telling
note,
you,
though, real quick side note, never
uh,
see the American or the extended version of, I'm not even sure which it is, of Good, Bad, the Ugly. It's terrible.
are you talking about the soundtrack
No,
or
no,
the
the movie,
movie?
the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Huh?
there's two different versions, and
I didn't know that.
I watch the movie like I've seen it a million times, but I watch it now and then every couple of
Uh-huh.
years, and I was watching. I'm like, wait, what's this? Wait, what's this? And it's terrible. It is
Well,
so
the original cut's almost 3 hours long. So
yeah.
how long is this
It's
other
not
version?
longer, but it's got because I think they cut out it's because I think they cut some stuff that ended up in the version we know and love.
Huh?
But I'm telling you, if you watch it, because at first I was like, I don't remember this, and I'm thinking, oh, it must be me, and
You really are getting
I'm
old.
old, I drink, I was like, it must be me, and then at a certain point, I was like, wait, it's not me, and I went and looked it up. So
Interesting. I didn't know that
so
that was available.
yeah,
And speaking of that movie, I remember that being your favorite movie because when Michelle and I stayed with you when you were living just outside of Boston in I think 2000, you had a big poster,
the frame
big,
poster, yeah, yeah.
yeah, in your house, and I that's when you said that was your all-time favorite movie, which surprised me.
Yeah, and it's not anymore, although it still is in my top 25. Uh,
Hmm.
but and sadly, I don't have that poster anymore. Very sadly, that's the one of the prices you pay for moving a lot. So my favorite movie of all time now is now and has been for a while, The Bridge over River Kwai.
Hmm.
But I still love Good, Bad, the Ugly. One of the problems with Good, Bad, and the Ugly is that like as Clint has become like a right-wing Republican, it's been harder for me to okay. It's been harder for me to ignore that.
Yeah, yeah.
Compartmentalized. That's the word I
Huh.
was looking for. I usually can do it, but I just struggle with that for whatever reason.
Interesting.
And then I've also seen it so many times. That and High Plains Drifter and for a few dollars more and Fistful of Dollars that at a certain point, it's you talked about music that goes through you like water. Like,
Hmm.
and like there's some movies I've just seen them too many times,
Hmm.
just like certain albums.
So, going back to the Ennio
Yeah.
movie, it was really interesting. The first half an yeah, I'd say the first half an hour, it's pretty ponderous, and I thought, actually, maybe this is actually not going to be very good. But once you get through that first half an
Okay, that's
hour,
good to know. Yeah.
it's moving, it's touching. It shines a light on how fucking brilliant he is as or was as a musician. A lot of it is the guy sitting with him while Morricone's behind a piano playing the these motifs from these movie soundtracks that most people are very familiar with, and even the more obscure ones I'm really familiar with. And it was just so fantastic to watch him play these little pieces. And he's very nonchalant about it and very humble. And he's like, "Oh, well, I just did this and I did that and I did this and came up with this. It seemed to work." And I got goosebumps throughout, probably 20 times throughout the last 2 hours of it. It's just it was another really, really well done music doc.
Good to know about the slow beginning because then I'll hang in there.
Well, and it's not, in fact, I shouldn't call it slow.
Hmm.
It's done so fast with so many quick cuts of people talking about him, the typical talking head sort of thing
Yeah.
that so many documentaries rely upon. And it's all, people speak in Italian and it's subtitled, of course, but it's just too quick and it's just not getting at the essence of what made him so great. And once that passes, though, boy, it is really good.
Okay, cool. That one I have queued up as well, and that's Prime Video, so that'll never expire. So
But sometimes they take stuff off of
that could, yeah, it
their
could leave.
service.
Yeah, it's been there for a while, but yeah, I should get on that. And I also have Distant Sky queued up there as well.
Ooh,
So
another good one.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah. the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds
Yeah.
live concert. Man, that's really good as well.
I was watching a movie and In My Arms was part of the soundtrack, and that's a pretty
What movie was that?
cool song. I can't remember.
I didn't realize that was
Yeah, I'll
part
have
of
to
the
look it up.
soundtrack.
Yeah, and it was from it. Yeah, because that was just like a month or two ago. I'll have to look it up and see. But I was like, I was like, wait, this song is so cool. Then I was like, who is this? And I'm like, I know this song. I'm like, oh, Nick Cave. Okay.
So,
It might have been a TV show.
hmm,
Um, so
it's called Into My Arms, and you
Into
know
My Arms. Yeah,
who it was written about?
I did. I can't remember.
PJ Harvey.
Yes, yep,
They they apparently had a short and tempestuous relationship in the
yeah,
90s, and the word is that that was written about her after they broke up.
yeah. I saw something about it. I didn't see like a Nick Cave documentary, but I saw something which talked about that. I don't can't remember what I watched because he was an interesting sort of weird guy as they were doing this thing. Um, and his wife was in it. And I was like, man, married to that guy, you got to be a saint. It's like, what is there a documentary on him?
Oh yeah, there's numerous. There's
Okay.
at least three that I know of,
Oh,
besides Push the Sky Away, which is basically just a live concert.
yeah.
But there's three or four that have all come out within the last 15 years.
Okay, because I was watching one of those. Yeah.
One of them was built around the recording of this record called Skeleton Key, which came out about 10 years ago. And that whole record was basically in response to one of his 14-year-old twins falling off a cliff in Brighton and dying. He was tripping on acid.
Yeah. What's the
And
name of that one?
I think it's called,
Because I think that's what I saw.
oh God, I can't remember the name
Okay.
of it.
Okay.
Um,
I think that's the one I saw.
yeah, I can't remember, but
Mm.
it's of course, really poignant and really sad, but also uplifting at the same time.
Yeah.
If if that's possible, when somebody has just lost one of their 14-year-old kids to a pretty freak accident. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Those are the things. No, I know those are the things that could happen to me at that age. Yeah.
for sure. We did so many
Yeah.
stupid things when we were young, and especially while experimenting with drugs or alcohol or just you know foolish behavior in general. And
Yeah.
that's part that's part of being that age,
Yeah.
and especially if you're a young male growing up in the 70s and 80s when there wasn't a lot of parents around, a lot of supervision, and you're
TV
left to
wasn't
your
that
own.
great.
Well, that's when kids were actually outside
Yeah.
up to nonsense as
Yeah.
opposed to sitting in their room hypnotized by a phone or a laptop
That
or a iPad or whatever.
that
And
that
so,
sorry.
go ahead.
That's my favorite New Yorker cartoon is there's a kid in his room with all his stuff in front of him
Uh,
and his mom's out in the hall and he's saying to his mom, "Go out and play." What is this, 1962? Because yeah, when I
okay.
was growing up, we were outside, we were playing, frisbee football, we were playing ultimate, we were playing, cops and robbers, Relivio. There's no internet, there was no computers. There was like it was either do that or play Pong. That's how cool the video game was. Pong, like two circles and two rectangles and a circle.
Yeah, but
Um,
that was even very, very rare, for that first year or so.
yeah,
Like, boy, if somebody had Pong, that was, woo, they
yeah.
fancy people.
When we got HBO, I was over the moon,
Oh, yeah.
and they only had like three movies on it. Like that was it.
S-
It was
So, speaking of that, do you remember getting the HBO guide
yep, yep,
in the mail?
yeah,
I remember
uh,
that would show up at once a month. It
yeah,
was a little guide about this big,
yeah,
maybe 15 pages long,
yeah.
and I
Of
take a
thin paper.
marker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I take a marker. I'd look through it, and meticulously mark the movies that I wanted to watch, especially the ones with nudity, and I would make sure that I stayed up, like, when everybody else was in bed
Yeah,
to
like
watch
2 a.m.
Swept Away,
Yeah,
things like that, where
yeah.
like just blew my mind at 10 years old.
Well, one of the things I really miss, even though it was more difficult than it is now, is when the in Boston there's a paper called the Phoenix, and when the
Mhm,
Phoenix would come out, it would just have all the upcoming shows.
mhm.
And so whenever the new Phoenix came out, I raced down to get a copy so I could see, okay, so and so's coming in, like the Pretenders